The winter light in Buffalo barely touched the room. The curtains were half closed, the air unmoving, the clock on the wall frozen 3 days ago. On the floor, beside the recliner that never rocked again, lay the still body of an old man, skin already turning the color of paper left in the rain, and curled against his chest, pressed so close it looked stitched to him, was a thin orange cat, ribs sharp, fur dull, eyes half open but awake. He hadn't left, not once. Flies moved before neighbors did. The smell arrived before concern did. Hunger came before help did. But the cat stayed, unmoved by time, temperature, or decay. He licked the cold hand that no longer stroked him. He slept on the silent heartbeat. He guarded a body that could no longer protect him. The food bowl was empty, the water dish was dry. The radiator clicked, but never warmed. Outside, snow piled against the door. Mail stacked. Phones rang, unanswered. But the cat did not scratch the door or meow for rescue. He kept his place, the last space where the world had made sense. He did not understand death. He understood absence. Every few hours he stood, walked in a slow circle, then returned to the man's chest, placing his head where the heart used to be, not waiting for it to beat again, just refusing to let it stop alone. On the fourth day, the sound that broke the silence was not the old man's voice. It was the cat. A small, raw cry, not asking to be saved, but begging someone to unsee what love looks like when the world has already left. Buffalo doesn't forgive the forgotten. Winter. There is not a season, it is a verdict. Streets go quiet. Windows stay shut. People disappear behind doors, and unless someone checks, no one knows who made it through the cold and who didn't. That is how an old man died alone in his chair, 3 days before anyone wondered why his light stayed on, but his footsteps stopped. But someone knew. Someone noticed the change the moment it happened. Not a neighbor, not a friend, a cat, the only creature who shared the room where time stopped. He didn't leave when the man's voice faded. He didn't run when the heat went out. He didn't break the silence. He lived inside it. This is not a story about death. This is a story about loyalty that outlived the heartbeat it was tied to. Before we go deeper, do the one thing that decides how many people this story reaches. Hit like, subscribe, and comment the city and state you're watching from. That single comment tells the platform this isn't just another pet story. It tells the algorithm that love doesn't end when breathing does. Because while the world ignored the man, the cat didn't. And when the door finally opened, when the smell forced attention, when the body was discovered, he didn't run. He hissed. He protected, guarding the man even in death, as if grief had teeth. He wasn't waiting to be rescued. He was refusing to abandon the one who never abandoned him. The last person who saw him alive didn't know it would matter. It wasn't a dramatic goodbye, no final handshake, no sign that death was waiting behind the next breath. It was just a quiet exchange at the corner market on Amherst Street, the kind of place where the cashier knows every customer by rhythm, not by name. He bought the same things he always did: a loaf of rye bread, a carton of milk, 2 cans of soup, and a small can of tuna. Not for him, but for the orange cat who always met him at the door before he even turned the key. He walked slow, not because age demanded it, but because life no longer rushed him. He was the kind of man everyone in the neighborhood recognized, but no one really knew. A nod on the sidewalk, a soft smile, a faded winter coat that had seen more Januaries than most people in the block. He lived alone, but he was not lonely, at least not in the way humans measure it. He had routine, he had ritual, and he had the silent, warm weight of the cat who slept behind his knees every night. The cashier remembered one detail later. He said, "Storm's coming," and the old man replied, "Me and the boy will stay warm." The boy, that's what he called the cat. Not pet, not animal. The boy. Like family. He walked home, groceries in one hand, cane in the other, snow already dusting his shoulders. When he reached his building, the cat was in the window, as always, tail tapping the glass, not in impatience, but in relief. The door clicked open, and the cat wove between his legs, guiding him inside as though escorting royalty into a kingdom measured in square meters. No one saw what happened next. No one heard the fall. No one noticed when the television kept playing, but the chair stayed still. The world moved on outside. Buses passed, snow trucks rumbled, neighbors carried groceries of their own. But inside, Time dropped dead the moment his heart did. The first day passed without suspicion. Mail arrived. Nobody checked. The second day passed. A package was left outside the door. Still nothing. The third day, the smell began seeping through the seams. Not strong yet, just a quiet sourness that only living noses recognize before it becomes unbearable. But the cat knew long before any scent betrayed the truth. He tried first the gentle ways, pawing at the man's arm, nudging the chin that no longer tilted toward him, lying on the chest that no longer rose. When that failed, he curled himself into the space beneath the jaw, where the heartbeat used to echo against his fur at night. He stayed there until his own ribs pressed against skin like empty shelves. He could have left. The window was cracked from the cold. Cats survive on instinct stronger than memory. But this wasn't instinct. It was attachment. A choice. The kind of loyalty that doesn't panic. It commits. Hours turned into days. Hunger clawed at his belly first, then thirst burned through his throat, then cold settled into his bones like a second skeleton. But the cat didn't move from the man's side, except to circle back into place, as though resetting the moment where the world still made sense. Outside, neighbors argued about parking spots buried in snow. School buses returned late. Car alarms failed in the cold. Life continued in the indifferent way life always does. Inside, the cat watched over a man who no longer needed watching, but who had never once left him waiting. The only sound in the apartment was the radiator clicking uselessly. Then finally, on the fourth day, the cat made the first noise he had made since the man died. A single hollow cry. Not for help, but for witness. The first day without him did not feel like a day. It felt like a pause, a space where reality hadn't yet announced itself. The cat didn't understand the stillness, not at first. He had lived through quiet before. Late nights, slow Sundays, days when the man slept longer than usual. But this silence was different. It had no breath inside it, no movement, no warmth. It was the kind of silence that does not end, only deepens. At sunrise, the cat did what he had always done. He jumped onto the recliner, nudged the man's chin with his head, pressed his whiskers to the familiar face. The man did not wake. The cat waited. He licked the corner of the man's mouth the way he always did when breakfast was late. Still nothing. He walked down the man's arm, sat on his chest, looked into the closed eyes, searching for that tiny flutter cats recognize before humans do. There was no flutter, so the cat lay down again, not in panic, in denial. His body curled exactly where it belonged, tail wrapped over the man's shoulder, head resting under the jaw, as if he could warm life back into him. Hours passed. Hunger came. Hunger was new. Not the small hunger between meals and the real kind. The kind that gnaws at the ribs and makes the world shrink into a narrow tunnel of need. He stood once, walked to the empty bowl, sniffed it, then walked back. The man always filled it. That was the rhythm. Without the man, the rhythm didn't restart. By late afternoon, the cold crept in. Buffalo cold does not warn. It seeps. It makes every surface feel like stone. The cat shivered, but did not move from the man's body. Hunger could wait. Cold could wait. He knew one truth. Leaving meant losing, and he wasn't ready to lose him. Night fell. The apartment turned into a cave of shadows. Outside, snow piled higher, muffling every sound. No footsteps in the hallway. No knocks on the door. No one wondered why the lights inside never changed. Buffalo is a city where loneliness doesn't scream. It settles. The second morning came without meaning. The cat tried again. A paw pressed onto the man's face. A nudge. A sound. A small cry. More air than voice. When nothing answered, he curled tighter, nose tucked into the lifeless shirt, trying to breathe in a scent that was already fading. By the end of the second day, dehydration arrived. Thirst hurts differently than hunger. The mouth dries, the tongue sticks, the body aches. The cat walked to the bathroom sink, stretched his neck, hoping for drops from a faucet that would not drip. He returned, lay down again. The third day was when the body began changing. The temperature of the room made the process slower, but not silent. The smell started subtle, an unfamiliar sweetness turning sour. The cat didn't leave. If anything, he lay even closer, as if the scent was not decay but proof that the man still existed. The house felt heavier now. The air didn't move. The calendar on the fridge still marked the day he died. a blue circle around a date he never reached. The cat stared at it once, as though the number itself should have kept him alive. No humans entered. No one asked questions. The mailbox filled. Snow buried the stairs. Voices passed outside, but none belonged to someone who noticed that one window had not changed position in 3 days. But the cat noticed everything. He noticed the sound of trucks outside, but not boots stopping at the door. He noticed the late afternoon light no longer landing on the man's hand because the sun had shifted without being watched. He noticed the air becoming bitter and the man's skin losing warmth not in moments, but in degrees. On the 4th day, the smell finally escaped the apartment. That is when the world remembered him, not because it cared, but because it could no longer ignore. By the time the 4th sunrise tried to touch the room, the light could not find a surface that felt alive. The curtains held it like a net holds a struggling fish, and then let it go. Dust floated in the air with the slow grace of snow that has forgotten how to fall. The television screen glowed without a sound, a moving picture that had ceased to mean anything to the only witness left inside. The orange cat lifted his head, blinked at the brightness, and then pressed his face back into the knit sweater that still carried the last salt of the man's skin. The smell strengthened. It did not arrive as an attack. It arrived as a certainty. Sweet first, then metallic, then a heaviness that pressed against the back of the throat and lingered there like a word that would not form. The cat did not recoil. He breathed it in the way the heart breathes a memory. He shifted higher on the chest that no longer rose. He stretched his forelegs straight and laid them across the rib cage as he had done on 100 winter afternoons, when warmth still moved under his paws. Now there was only the suggestion of shape. The man had become a room for the cat to keep. Hunger gnawed without pause. It stole strength from his hips. It hollowed his belly until even the simplest jump felt like a cliff. Thirst was worse. The mouth dried to chalk. The tongue cracked. Every swallow burned. He rose twice and padded to the kitchen. The bowl stared back, white and useless. The tap offered nothing. The cold made the metal sting his nose. He stood in the doorway and listened to the wind work the building as if it were a tired instrument. Then he returned. Small steps, slow as prayer. Flies gathered. First one, then a map of them. They circled, landed, lifted, settled again. The cat watched them with a calm that comes only to creatures who have accepted that nothing can be changed by movement. When they came near his man's face, he lifted a paw and flicked them away, not with fury, but with the mild insistence of habit. He cleaned the forehead with dry licks that rasped. He groomed the white hair one last time, as if the man was simply sleeping too deeply to greet the day. Time softened its edges. The clock above the doorway still pointed at the hour of death. The calendar on the fridge held a square of paper where someone had circled a dentist appointment with a blue pen. The cat looked at none of it. Animals do not keep schedules. They keep bonds. He understood this one truth without language. Leaving would break it. Staying made it whole, even if the cost was everything else a body requires. As the day stretched, the cat began to talk to the room, not with meows made to summon help, with a voice that barely left his throat, a small sound, repeated. When no answer came, he lowered his head and kept vigil. In that apartment on that block in Buffalo, grief did not look like wailing. It looked like refusal to move. Outside, the plow carved a corridor through snow and left a wall of ice along the curb. A neighbor cursed the weight of a shovel. A child laughed, the sound cut short by a parent's call. None of that crossed the door. Cold pressed harder against the glass. The radiator ticked and failed and then ticked again, a weak heartbeat for a body called home. The change in the man's hands told the story before the rest of him did. Skin tightened and then loosened in the wrong directions. Color withdrew like a tide. The cat nudged the fingertips until they aligned with his cheek. He could anchor himself there. He could keep the shape of the man in his mind by making the shape real with touch. He closed his eyes and pictured the movements he knew by heart. The way the hand had once lifted a spoon, the way it had once tied the string to a toy, the way it had once cupped water for him when the bowl ran dry. Late afternoons slid in without ceremony. The apartment took the color of old photographs. The cat stood, walked a slow circle on the blanket, lay down again. He placed one paw over the man's sternum like a seal. The flies hummed. The fridge motor groaned and stopped. Somewhere below, a door slammed. Somewhere above, a neighbor coughed. The cat kept his oath. When evening came, cold sharpened. The cat shook. He pushed his body deeper into the man's sweater to steal whatever warmth the fabric had trapped between its threads. Every breath he took hit the chest and bounced back at him, a small echo he could mistake for life if he wanted to. He allowed the mistake. Belief is a blanket too. His eyes found the window. Snow stacked high against the sill, sculpted by wind. Streetlights turned the drift into a pale hill. Tiny ice crystals at the edge glittered like the shards of a promise. He lowered his gaze and listened for footsteps in the hall. None came. He returned to the silence and wore it like a coat. Night again. The worst yet. Thirst split his tongue. He tasted iron and swallowed air. He dreamed on and off without sleeping, the way exhaustion fakes rest. In the not-quite dream, a door opened. In the not-quite dream, boots crossed the floor. In the not-quite dream, hands touched his back. He woke to the exact same room. He breathed in and pressed forward so hard, his whiskers bent against the sweater. He did not cry. He did not beg. He waited. Morning proved that the body can endure more than the mind believes. He stood because standing was the only test left. He moved to the bathroom and found a single bead of water trembling on the faucet. He stretched his neck, touched it with his tongue, and it broke against his mouth like a lie. He returned to the man and accepted that the day would be longer than he could feel and shorter than he could measure. The smell leaked into the hallway. It found the mail slot. It slipped under the door like a thief and reached the nose of the woman in apartment 3 who had a memory for trouble. She paused outside her own door and frowned. She leaned closer. She listened and heard the television. She knocked once. She waited. She knocked again. Nothing. She looked at the pile of envelopes against his threshold and felt a small pinprick of dread. She told herself that cold can make a room smell strange. She told herself that he might be out visiting a cousin. She told herself that she would check again after dinner. Inside, the cat slept and woke and did not move away from the face he knew. He adjusted his body to block the draft that crawled under the window. He placed his chin on the collarbone and watched the door without blinking, as if his stare alone could pull the knob toward him. In his chest, the heart kept time like a tired drummer. A fly landed on the man's lip. The cat tapped it away. He cleaned the mouth once more and then rested, empty of strength but full of duty. Somewhere in the building, a phone rang until it died. Somewhere down the block, an ambulance wailed and then went quiet. He listened to both and chose neither. The woman from apartment 3 came back with a neighbor from 5, the one with a key ring heavy with old metal. They spoke in the hallway in tones that tried not to disturb the air. They knocked. They called his name. They pressed an ear to the door and heard only the television. The neighbor from 5 tried one key, then another. None fit. He shook his head and said they should call someone who could open it without damage. The woman did not want to wait. Waiting had a smell now. Inside, the cat stood as if summoned by the idea of help. He arched his back, a stretch so thin it looked like a thread pulled taut. His tail lifted and then lowered. He touched the man's cheek one more time with the side of his face and made the almost sound again, a little note offered to the quiet in case the quiet had ears. The neighbor from 5 went downstairs to find the superintendent. The woman from 3 stayed and pressed her palm to the door as if a pulse might answer her. Her eyes watered. She told herself it was the cold air from the stairwell. She did not look at the mail on the floor because paper can be proof of abandonment in a way that bones are not. The superintendent arrived with a set of tools. Metal met metal. The chain inside scraped. The bolt shifted. The door held on to secrecy for one more stubborn second. Then it gave in. Cold hallway air rushed inside and mixed with the dense breath of death until the corridor itself recoiled. The woman lifted her hand to her mouth. The neighbor from 5 looked away. The superintendent took a step, then another, then stopped. The cat did not run. He stood on the man's chest, thin body tall as a flag, eyes bright as flint. He hissed once, a sound that said, "This space is taken." He lowered his head and pressed it into the sweater and waited for them to understand what he had understood the moment the room changed. No one was coming to save the man. They were coming to see that he had been loved to the very last minute. The woman whispered almost to herself that someone should call. The neighbor from 5 was already dialing. The superintendent bowed his head without meaning to, as if some old ritual had been awakened in him. Snow hissed at the door like static. The cat held his ground. He would not move until Hans knew how to lift the dead without breaking the living. And on that threshold between neglect and notice, the room finally filled with footsteps. The door opened only halfway before the smell pushed its way out, a dense wave that made the hallway feel smaller, older, and wrong. The superintendent covered his nose with his sleeve. The woman from apartment 3 stepped back, hand over her mouth, eyes already watering. The neighbor from 5 didn't step in at all. He stayed in the doorway, frozen between curiosity and the instinct to flee. But the cat didn't move. He stood over the man's chest like a monument, legs shaking from days without food or water, fur separating in damp strands, but eyes fixed and bright. No growl, no panic, only refusal. He had guarded the body for 4 days, and he would not surrender it just because the world finally remembered it existed. The superintendent tried calling the man's name, once, twice, louder, the 3rd time. The sound echoed through the room and came back empty, swallowed by the stillness. The television flickered, playing a morning rerun to no one. Snowlight poured in through the window, illuminating the truth more clearly than the bulb in the ceiling ever could. The woman whispered, "Oh God, he's been gone a while." The superintendent nodded once and reached for his phone. The cat hissed, not wild, not feral, defensive. The kind of hiss that says, "Do not touch what is still mine." He lowered his head and placed it back on the man's shoulder, as if demonstrating ownership one last time. The superintendent paused, his voice softened, almost apologetic now. "Buddy, we have to help him." The cat did not care about the tone. He cared about the bond. Minutes later, the paramedics arrived. 2 men, gloves on, expression already shaped by experience. They had seen death before. They had seen isolation before. But they had not seen this. A starving cat refusing to abandon a corpse, guarding it with the same loyalty the living had not shown. One paramedic approached slowly, crouched to eye level with the cat, and spoke the way people speak to infants and ghosts. "Hey, little guy, we're going to take him now. You did your job." The cat growled, low and steady. Not a performance, a declaration. The paramedic didn't force it. Instead, he looked up and said, "We'll move him after animal control gets here." But animal control wasn't needed, because the cat wasn't a threat. He was grief with fur. The second paramedic stood by the door, filling out the form. Time of discovery, probable TOD, conditions of the scene. The clipboard shook slightly in his hand, not from fear but from the weight of the details he had no space to write. Lived alone, died alone, loved by one creature who refused to leave. The cat remained on the man's chest until the last possible second, until the stretcher came in, until the body bag was unrolled, until hands in blue gloves reached down. He didn't scratch, he didn't bite. He simply held position until they touched the sweater, and then his body trembled as though the world was being unstitched below him. The woman from apartment 3 cried then, not for the man she barely knew, but for the cat who had known him better than anyone ever did. When they finally lifted the man, the cat tried to climb back onto him, claws catching fabric, a silent plea not to interrupt the only routine he still understood. One paramedic caught him gently, cradled his thin body, held him to his chest. The cat didn't fight. He just stared at the stretcher as it left the room, eyes following it the way a lighthouse follows a departing ship, watching until the last trace vanished. Then the room was empty, not of death, but of purpose. The paramedic looked down at the orange body in his arms and said the sentence that would decide the rest of his life. "He's not going to the shelter. He's coming with us." And just like that, the cat who stayed with the dead was carried by the living. The stretcher rolled down the hallway first, wheels squeaking against old tiles, the zipped black bag moving slowly past all the doors that never opened while the man was alive. Behind it, in the arms of the younger paramedic, the orange cat stared forward, unblinking, every muscle weak but every instinct awake. He didn't look back at the apartment. He didn't need to. Everything he loved had already been carried out. The paramedics didn't speak in the elevator. Some silences don't need words. One held the body the way the living are held. The other held the cat the way the grieving are held. Carefully, not because they're fragile, but because they have already survived more than they should. Outside, the snow kept falling. Buffalo winter had not paused for death. The ambulance doors opened, the stretcher slid in, the cat remained in the paramedic's arms. Normally, protocol demanded separation. The dead go one way, the animals another. But nothing about this scene fit protocol. The paramedic didn't put the cat in a crate. He wrapped him in a thermal blanket, sat with him in the front seat and turned the heat up. Inside the ambulance, the cat rested his head against the paramedic's coat and finally closed his eyes. Not in comfort, but in exhaustion. Not sleep, surrender to safety. At the morgue intake desk, the attendant looked up from paperwork, saw the cat, and asked the question every system is built to ask: is that animal being transferred to a shelter? The paramedic shook his head. No, he's being transferred to us. He didn't ask permission. He declared custody. A photo was taken, not planned, not staged. Someone from the fire department snapped it on their phone. The orange cat curled in the paramedic's arms, eyes half shut, stretcher in the background, snow against the red lights of the ambulance. That photo traveled faster than the body ever would. First group chat, then neighborhood Facebook page, then local news, then state, then everywhere. The cat who never left his owner's side. 4 days without food, still refused to abandon him. The only one who stayed. People commented things no one had said while the man was alive. Someone should have checked on him. No elderly person should die unseen. How does a cat understand loyalty better than society? The outrage wasn't loud. It was ashamed. Photos of the cat in the clinic appeared next. Thin body, red blanket, eyes still searching for someone no longer in the world. Donations poured in, not for medical care, for something nobody expected. Find him a real family. He deserves to be loved the way he loved. But the paramedic had already decided. He brought the cat home first, just for the night. The night became two. Two became a week. The cat began sleeping on his chest, just like before. Only this time, the heartbeat under him was still there. He would jolt awake sometimes, pad across the bed, look toward the doorway, as if waiting for the old man's steps, then return. With time, the tremors faded, but the habit stayed. Every night he lay across a chest and listened for life. The paramedic named him Beaks, Freight. Not because he was heavy, but because he carried weight no one could see. He brought him to the fire station. The crew met him with stunned quiet. Someone opened a can of tuna. Someone else wiped their eyes. One firefighter said, "That cat's seen more loyalty than most people ever will." Freight did not become a mascot. He became a reminder. Every time the alarm sounded, every time a call came for a welfare check, every time a door had to be forced open because someone hadn't been heard from in days, the crew remembered the apartment, the silence, the smell, the orange cat who never left. A plaque was hung in the station, in memory of everyone who died unnoticed, and every animal who didn't let them go alone. Freight walked past it every morning on his way to the food bowl. He didn't read it. He didn't need to. He was the reason it existed. He had proven without speech, without gesture, without even understanding the word death, that love isn't measured by how long it lasts. It's measured by how long it refuses to leave. The apartment was emptied, the furniture sold, the carpet ripped up, the calendar thrown away. The old man's name entered a system that records the dead without asking who once waited for them. The world moved on, the way it always does when life ends quietly, with no audience, no headlines, no hands holding the final breath. But the cat didn't let the ending stay small. He turned it into something witnessed, something remembered, something carried. He did not break the door, he did not call for help. He simply stayed, and in staying he made the absence impossible to ignore. People call it instinct, people call it loyalty. But sometimes the truth is simpler. Love does not understand the difference between alive and gone. It only understands mine and still here. Freight now sleeps on a chest that still rises. He eats from a bowl that never stays empty. He wakes in a house where footsteps always return. But every once in a while, when the paramedic lies still too long, the cat will stand, place a paw on his face, and wait, the way he once waited in a room where no one answered. Not trauma, memory. The old man never got a funeral crowd or flowers or speeches, but he got something most people never receive, a witness to the very last moment, a presence that refused to leave, proof that even the forgotten were loved by someone. And now, in a fire station in Buffalo, the crew has a rule. Whenever a welfare check is called in, they go sooner, because a man once died alone, and a cat made sure the world found out.